Well, guys, we're going to start a new series today about the life and times of David. David is a person who honestly kind of vexes me. I think that's the first time I've ever used that word ever here, but he really does. He creates kind of an odd conflict that maybe you haven't considered before, and here's what it is, okay? Is that really David and Saul, if you were to have a scorecard of their issues, their faults, their failures, they're not that different. In fact, you could argue that David did some things even further than Saul ever did, and yet one man is a man after God's own heart, and another one is kind of kicked out of leadership and banished. And trying to make that work, there's some things that we like to do to make that make sense, but it really doesn't. It'll tend to fall short. Same thing with Judas and Peter. Both have an issue within the last 12 hours of Jesus' life, and one is restored. In fact, he's told he's going to be restored before he even messes up. And the other one goes this way, and what's that about? And if you could always connect all the pieces nice, neat, and clean, I would argue it's not God then that you're dealing with, okay? So there's going to be kind of this tension that's going to happen here as we walk through this. And to have the right kind of background of how did David become David, you first have to look at Saul. And there's so much of their lives that kind of overlap that we're going to look at in the coming weeks. And what that means and how it formed David into who David was and what that all means for your life as well. So here's just a little bit of background. Saul was born about 4 miles north of Bethlehem, okay, in a town called Gibeah. He is the son of Kish. And the way the story kind of gets kicked off, he's out looking for some lost donkeys. Kish, his father, sends with him a servant, says, hey, you got to go out and go find these lost animals. After 3 days, Saul is like, I don't know, man, let's pack it in and go home. But the servant that's with him is like, hey, I have a crazy idea. Let's try trusting God, okay? And he's like, okay, all right, I guess we could do that. The servant says, hey, there's this prophet in town, and his name is Samuel. Let's go see him. Then we get some insight and some wisdom about all of that, all right? Maybe he can help us out. What we already know is that Saul is already plagued with this feature in his personality that is going to follow him throughout the whole story and every dealing. He's afraid. He's fearful. And in this case, you already get the insight because he's afraid. What if we don't have anything nice to offer this prophet? We have, how's this going to look? Do we need to have some kind of a sacrifice or what have you? He's already stressed. That stress is going to follow him throughout the story. That fear is going to follow him, and it is going to be his undoing. Fear, okay? Fear, fear, fear. So, finally, there's a moment where the backstory is while that's happening, the children of Israel, God's people, okay, through a whole series of events, situations that have occurred, issues and strife within their leadership and within their culture and their community, they decide we want a king like everyone else. We want to be like every other nation. And Samuel tells them, he's like, listen, guys, you don't understand. You're going to get a leader like everyone else. He's going to put your sons in wars that you don't want to be in. He's going to tax every part of your life that you don't want to be taxed. Your life will be inhibited because you want a king like everybody else. Your life will be less free, less enjoyable. You're going to have less of your stuff that God has given you. And you're going to end up in conflict and situations that you don't even want to be in. And they're like, yeah, we'll take that. Sounds good. Now understand, at the story of Saul, it's the very beginning of what you now get to live in thousands of years later. Broken pieces led by broken people producing broken outcomes. So from this point on, we now have human leadership. And human leadership gives human beings exactly what Saul would give. If you read what Samuel is telling them is going to happen, you can go, wow, was this written thousands of years ago or last week? Because it's going to be the same issues. But the people still want it. What I love is what happens is when it comes to deciding who this king is going to be, all of this is kind of happening concurrently, okay? And so when all of a sudden Saul comes into town, meets with Samuel, God puts on Samuel's heart, this is the guy, a Benjaminite. It's him. This is the guy that's supposed to be the king. So he's anointed at that point by Samuel. Meanwhile, this is what the people are wanting, right? What's funny to me is the people choose Saul, okay? And this is what it says in 1 Samuel 9:2. Check it out. Kish had a son named Saul, as handsome a young man as could be found anywhere in Israel, and he was a head taller than anyone else. Do you know why these people picked Saul? Because he's tall and good looking. Who's going to lead us? Who's going to help us navigate culture and society? Who's going to help administrate this entire situation that we're in? Who's going to worry about diplomacy with our enemies and everyone else? Oh, I know, the tall guy that's good looking. So this is also what plays in us to this day. How easily we can give in to what we see rather than what God is looking at is the heart, see? So already they're off the rails. They're enamored with the man who's a head taller than everyone else and is better looking than everyone else. He's perfect. We'll take him. We don't know a thing about his character. We don't know a thing about how he's going to rule. He's tall and good looking. What a hood ornament for our nation. We'll do it. Okay? So this is what happens. So they go all in, okay? And there's something crazy that happens as the Spirit of God then falls on Saul to such a degree that the people, when they first encounter the person that they'd always known, that they'd always grown up with, whose father they knew, after the Spirit of God descends upon Saul, this is the saying that comes out of 1 Samuel 10:12b. So it became a saying, is Saul also among the prophets? What they're saying is, when did he become so spiritual? That's not him. He's just a tall, good-looking guy that liked to fight. That's it. And all of a sudden, he's speaking in a way that doesn't match the person that they knew. And this even confuses the townspeople and everybody else. They're like, who is this guy? Okay? And what ends up happening is that as this kind of keeps building on, and it's leading up now to what is actually like a coronation, okay? Like the moment to where now he's been chosen, okay? He's been told by Samuel, he's been anointed, okay? The people of God, they're excited about who this leader is. And the day of like his actual coronation, this is what happens. Remember fear. 1 Samuel 10:22. So they inquired of the Lord, has the man come here yet? And the Lord said, yes, he's hidden himself among the supplies. The day is set up for the coronation of Saul to be the king. Saul, seeing the gravity of the situation and how many people are present and the enormous authority that's about to be placed on him, responsibility, he's hiding behind the storage shed, hoping no one will see the biggest person in the group. Like, that's what's happening. And God has to tell them, no, he's over there. He really doesn't want to do this. But you picked him. And it's been confirmed. You rejected me. You want to be led by this person? Best of luck. He's over there hiding behind the supplies. So at that point now, he steps into leadership reluctantly, okay? And the problem with a person who's insecure, when a person is insecure and they don't know who they are, then they don't know their value. You give a person who doesn't know who they are and therefore doesn't know their value intrinsically as a person, and then you give them power, that is a toxic, bad situation. I saw that practically when I went to the seminary. There were some guys that the longer that they were in the seminary and the more that they learned, the more humble they became by the opportunity to serve God and his people. In fact, the more they learned, the more it kind of broke them, that they were amazed that, how am I in this situation? How was I called in this? Then there were others that they were picked last and kicked ball their whole life. And this was their chance to finally have power and authority. and it worked the exact opposite. And the further they got along, you could see the evolution. So it's no different even in my calling and people who are pastors, and you see it in corporate America, you see it in every aspect of your life. Maybe it's your family and friends. It's people that there's never enough validation for who they are. Never will be enough. And they will do everything they can at any time to turn the screws to anybody at any time, because it's just like a little bit of a drug. Just for a moment, it makes them feel better about who they are. But just like the drug, it'll fade. And then they got to find another hit of another person that they can turn the screws to. And this is Saul. He's a fearful, insecure person who reluctantly never wanted the position, realizes that he got in the position because he's taller than everybody else and better looking than everyone else. So he knows in the back of his mind, this whole thing, I don't even belong in this situation. But the Spirit of God has fallen on me, I got it. And now he's doing insecurity to hubris. Fake, phony, puffed up chest, I got it, see? But it's all a sham. That's his situation. So finally he's told at one point in a battle, here's the thing, like he keeps wanting to get into one war after another, one group after another. He's engaged all the time with the Philistines. And he finally looks at all of his men as he's in a battle, and this is a great example of that insecurity. Saul says this to his troops in 1 Samuel 14:24. He says, "Cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies." So none of the people tasted food. That's a fast. A fast is a deeply spiritual, religious connection of what you're doing between you and your God to have insight and to want to learn more about him and to show a connection and sacrifice for him. But Saul is just doing things that look holy. They're patterned after something that seems genuine, but it's not. He just wants to beat this enemy, and he tells everyone, stop eating until I get my payback. See? So this is already how he's operating. Then there's finally a point where things go to the next level. And God tells Saul, through Samuel, you need to destroy the Amalekites. All of them. Everything. Everything that moves, breathes, or lives. Wipe it all out. Saul doesn't do this. Saul spares different people. Saul lets their king off the hook, doesn't take the life of the king. Saul lets some of their animals, their best of their animals, live. And finally, Samuel has had enough. Samuel knew what he did, and Samuel begins to turn the screws on Saul. Why did you let these live? Why did you let this happen? Why is the king still walking around? Saul, what's going on? Why didn't you listen? Why are you making sacrifices to yourself? Why are you doing things that I am supposed to be doing and God has appointed me to do, and you're doing those very things, acting like a priest when you're not? Why are you stepping out of line? And now it's all culminated to you explicitly not following the directive of God to wipe out this enemy. And you've let different groups and different people live, and animals and everything else. And finally Saul breaks down. Here's what he says in 1 Samuel 15:20-21. But I did obey the Lord, is his argument. Saul said, I went on the mission the Lord assigned me. I completely destroyed the Amalekites and brought back Agag, their king. The soldiers took sheep and cattle from the plunder, the best of what was devoted to God, in order to sacrifice them to the Lord your God at Gilgal. You see his argument. He's like, hey, I did everything you guys asked. And even when I took their stuff, I sacrificed it to God. Yeah, you told me not to, but it's their best, and I'm sacrificing it. Yeah, you said wipe everyone out, and I almost did. I kept the king. We're working stuff out, diplomacy. What do you want, right? Finally, Samuel pushes even harder on Saul, and this is what he says in 1 Samuel 15:24. Then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and your words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. So finally, it's the first time that Saul admits out loud, I did what I did because I live in fear. I disobeyed what you asked me to do, God, because I'm actually afraid. Now you realize up to this point, fear, when you're motivated by fear in this room, you can hide it so well. We all can. I can as well. People that are motivated by fear, much like love, sometimes even like hate, we have a way of hiding that. We don't want people to know that we're afraid. Fear can look like humility. Fear can look like sacrifice. It can look like some level of benevolence or generosity or kindness. But when a person is afraid, they'll kind of be a shapeshifter. They'll move around why they're doing what they're doing, and they don't want you to know that they're actually driven by fear. Fear of the loss of influence, the loss of a relationship, fear of maybe power or some kind of authority. And so they'll do things as though it's all about that other person, when in fact it's driven by fear. And what Samuel does to Saul is something that'll be hopefully useful in your life, which is he gives him something that is measurable. He bottom lines the situation. He gives him no room to wiggle or move. Because that's Saul's argument. Hey, I did this, I did this, I did this. My heart's right. And that's when Samuel's like, no, 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 no. Bottom line, you didn't do this. Bottom line, you didn't do that. Bottom line, you didn't do this. I'll give you an example, contemporary example. I had someone that I worked with one time in ministry, and it was a bad, abusive relationship, okay? And the person that came to me wanted out of the relationship. It was smart. They should get out of it, okay? And those of you that maybe have friends, families, neighbors, maybe you've even been in this situation yourself, and they're about ready to walk, and they know what's true, they know what's happened, but then the person starts telling them what? I'm different. I'll be better. I've changed. I did this, I did that, or I'll bring you flowers. And now all of a sudden the person is confused because they're moving the goalposts and the definition of what makes them worthy to even be in this relationship in the first place, see? So like in that situation, just like Samuel, you bottom line it and you make it something measurable. So I had this person with me, the person that really needed to get out of the situation. It was going to be bad. And I looked at them and I said, here it is. They said they want to change. They said they want to go to counseling. They say they want to get better. Perfect. Let me write you up a little something. Bullet points, bottom line. Okay, number one, you're out of the house for 6 months. Starting this date to this date. Number two, you're in counseling at this place at this time, and I need the counseling to be set up by next Wednesday at 12 o'clock. I need to see every bank account that exists that you've hidden from me up to this point. Any information, I want to know where it is and where the money's going. And I want that in 24 hours. Bottom line, see? And inevitably, what do you think happens? People that want to manipulate, they want out. Why? Because now you're proving, you're going to force them to actually put their money where their mouth is. And that's exactly what Samuel did with Saul. And so finally he was so pinned in because he just bottom lined it, measurable. You did not do this. You did not do that. You did not do this. Take your emotion, your feelings, and your attentions and move them off the table. Don't care. It's this, this, and this. When you're dealing with a manipulative or abusive person, it's a great way to bring clarity. And it's hard to see that clarity and embrace it when that's the situation, but it's also very freeing because then you know who you're dealing with. And finally, that's exactly what Saul had to do. He had to come forward and go, listen, I was afraid of the people. That's why I did what I did. And the next part, I couldn't help but put in this sermon rather than avoid it, all right? So here it is. Samuel says, bring me the king. The king walks in and goes, hey, so we're over the whole kill me thing, right? Here it is, 1 Samuel 15:33. But Samuel said, as your sword has made women childless, so shall your mother be childless among women. And Samuel hacked Agag in pieces before the Lord in Gilgal. Also with Saul standing there. Now, we don't have pilgrim swag, okay? But like, what a coffee mug or a t-shirt that would be, right? And Samuel hacked Agag in pieces before the Lord in Gilgal, Pilgrim Lutheran Church. Wouldn't that be great? Right? Welcome to Pilgrim, you know? There it is. It's hardcore. This is what it looked like. You didn't do it. And it's funny because from this point on, everyone's kind of afraid of Samuel. Every place he goes, they're willing to listen now. Like, we heard what you did, So this is how things begin to move forward for him in his life. In 1 Samuel 16:13, now they're looking for this shepherd boy. This shepherd boy is somewhere between 12 and 15 years of age at this point. All of his older brothers are first brought before Samuel because at this point the Spirit has now left Saul and it's going to descend upon someone else. What's weird is Saul is still in leadership. Saul before the people is in leadership for years. He continues to stay in official capacity for years, but Saul knows God has left him. Ball game. And it's moving to someone else. And it's all of David's older brothers that are big, tall, and strong, and they're all older than David, and they're all getting passed over. And finally, he's like, is there anybody else? He's like, yeah, well, the youngest one, he's out tending sheep. And Samuel's like, it's him. God tells him, that's the one. And it says right then and there, it says, so Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. And it also then would go on to say in verses 14 and 15, now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. Saul's attendant said to him, see, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Remember this. Martin Luther used to say this. The devil is God's devil. Absolute control over him. And from that point on, he's tormented. Why? He's finally getting to worship the thing that he was always worshiping. And it's really sad, because I do think he's probably really sorry to some degree about when it happened. And he does. He begs Samuel, can I go back? Can we redo this? Can we undo it? And for reasons that I don't understand and I can't explain to you, there was no going back at that point. And so he's tormented. Now, God has allowed now the spirit of something evil to drive this man insane, okay? Absolutely crazy. Here's what I want you to know to summarize week 1 of this story. The life of David is not about morality. And I get it. Oftentimes it's preached and taught that it's about morality. So next week we're going to look at David and Goliath, okay? And so sometimes what you'll hear a pastor say is, hey, how can you be the David to your Goliath, okay? And you pick up those 5 stones, which are passion and determination and heart and financial planning and Oprah. And you take all 5 and you're going to knock out that Goliath. That's your big challenge in your life and you can do it. And everyone's like, yeah, I feel good. I'm out of here. This is awesome. I got 5 steps to fix my messed up life. But here's the problem. You know what I just did to you? What I just did is we already went from 10 commandments to 15 commandments. See? You can't even do the 10, and I know that because Jesus outed you. That's why the cross is up here behind me. If you could do 10, it wouldn't be here. But it's there because you can't do the 10. So why give you 5 more that you're also not going to do? It's just more law. It's another list you can fail at. Spoiler alert. So the reason David is a man after God's own heart, because God gave David a heart for God and gave David the kind of heart that God would love. And in so doing that, David would live out in a way that would please God and love his heart. But it is not about morality. It is actually about a promise, because David is going to make epic mistakes and make huge, huge faults and failures that are going to show up. But God's promise is secure. And now here you are sitting here, and whether your faith this morning is nothing more than a mustard seed, whether your faith this morning is nothing more than a smoldering wick, it's not even a flame anymore. It's just smoke coming off the end of a match, and that's where you're at mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It's enough for God, because it's not about you, it's about his faithfulness. It's about his pursuit, and it's about his promise that's over your life that won't go anywhere. And don't make the mistake that a lot of people make, which is then, oh, so I'm going to heaven no matter what? What do we naturally think then? So what can I get away with? I can do whatever I want, right? I mean, I'm going to heaven. What difference does it make? You know, if I came to you and I said, hey, I came into some money and I want to be generous. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to completely renovate the inside of your home. I'm going to outfit it with the nicest, most extravagant, priceless type of interior and adornment of every kind you can even possibly imagine. It's going to blow your mind. I'm going to fix up the outside a little bit, but I'm really passionate about the inside. Oh, and another thing, I'm going to pay off your mortgage and cover all of your bills that are associated with your home. And then you look at me and go, well, how long are you going to do that? I'm going to go, well, forever. And here's the thing. Anyone else that you tell about this deal, I'll do the same for them. I'll do it. Just got to tell them. And you know what the people that are going to hear that from you, you know what they're going to want to do? They're not going to believe you at first. And they're going to go, I want to see it. Let me see it. Prove it. I want to come over. Let me see what's going on there. Let me see if this person's legit or this person's real. And can you imagine if no sooner I make that deal with you and you wipe the tears of joy out of your face, if you then look at me and pick up a sledgehammer and go, so can I knock out this wall? I mean, does this mean I can let my kids just finger paint on this wall? You're good with that? Can I destroy the sink over here? Can I let the animals, our pets, can they just go to the bathroom in the living room? I might even join them. Who knows? We'll see, you know? Like, what if we just destroy the room? And oh, by the way, sorry, I forgot. This one room, it's so 2023. I'd really like you to leave it alone. I know it's tacky and cheap, but I love it, okay? Because that's like my special room that I love. And I know you said this one thing in the middle is super, super expensive, but I have this knockoff IKEA thing. It's very, very cultural savvy. I'd like to have that here instead. How weird would that be? How bizarre would that be? You would never think to do that. But that's the deal we play with God all the time. I'm going to give you a new heart. I'm going to restore everything that's on the inside of you. I'm going to make sure that you don't have another debt between yourself and me for the rest of your existence. All good. See, the question is not what you can get away with. Wrong question. The actual question is, what best represents a God who would trade his life for yours so that you and everyone else you know could live with him for all eternity? What does those people in your life need to see? And at that point, the life that you live is no longer about the end of your nose, but it's now about who looks like Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Then you don't even have to ask me the moral question at that point, because you already know. That's what it's about. Your future is secure. And I'm going to remind you that you're forgiven of your sins later. And then you're going to come up here for communion. And you're going to taste and see, as David did, as he wrote in the Psalms, that the Lord is good. You're going to taste and see. You're going to commune with God. And you're golden. If you ever feel like you're not sure if God's got you, I'll remind you again. Good news. I'll remind you next Sunday again. You forget, I'll remind you the Sunday after that. So this is the life of David. We're going to hook it on with Goliath next week. Amen? Amen. Let's pray.